Hi again, everyone. This is Zach Rosette with Buildbox, and I'd like to welcome you to part 6 of the Make Your Own Game series. In part 5, we took a look at actions by adding coins and an invincibility power-up. And we looked at lighting, particle effects, and the path logic piece. In part 6, we're going to make our menus more interesting by animating the main menu and the game over menu. We are also going to import music and sound effects. Let's start off with animating the main menu. Let's click on the mind map button in the upper left, and Buildbox will take us up into the mind map. Now let's double click on our main menu user interface at the bottom of the window, which is where we will find the options to animate menu elements. Whenever we open this menu, like when the game starts, we want the title to come down from the top and the start button to come up from the bottom. To do so, let's start with animating the title by selecting the title, and at the bottom, where the movement editor is, let's select Open, as this is the animation we want to happen anytime we open this menu. Don't forget to push the record button so we are in record mode. And now let's move our title off screen towards the top. Remember, we can zoom out using the mouse scroll button and move the scene around by holding down the spacebar while we click and drag. Alright, so as long as the record button is enabled like it is, once we get our title into position and let go of the mouse button, Buildbox will record the position data at that frame. Right now we are at frame 0 and we see a green bar added to the animation editor. These green bars signify a position point for Buildbox to use. We can add quite a few things while Buildbox is recording. As you can see, if we expand the animation editor at the bottom, or if we want to rotate the title, Buildbox will remember the rotation at that frame. As we feed Buildbox more position points along the timeline, it will extrapolate everything in between for us, much like you saw in the particle emitter in part 5. We talked about different settings for that particle start size and end size, and how the emitter would do all the work to animate the particle so that it met the requirements we set forth in the options. The animation editor extrapolates movement in the exact same manner. We just need to tell Buildbox how we want things to look and at what frame, and Buildbox does all the magic for us. Now let's move our orange frame bar to the next point in time that we want to record a position point. Let's say we want this to be 20 frames in. Let's drag our title to the position we want it at while letting go of the mouse button. When we do this, we see another green position point added to our timeline at the bottom. Let's take a look at what happens now when this menu opens. Wow, that looks so much better. There's so many cool things that you can do with the animation editor, and you should really take advantage of it inside Buildbox. The next thing we want to do is animate our start button. To do so, let's go back into the editor and rewind our orange timeline marker back to frame 0 and shift and drag our start button off screen. Remember, we can hide or lock things in the outliner, so we can select and move things easier. When we let go of the mouse button, we see a green position marker added to the timeline. For the start button, let's drag our orange timeline marker to frame 20 where we had our title come to rest. We can drag our start button to where we want it, and when we let go of the mouse button, we see another position point recorded for our start button. Let's have a look at this now. This is looking really great. We can also play with what we have inside the editor so we don't have to preview our game every time. Just take the editor off record and bring our orange frame marker back to 0 and play it. It's now time to animate our character to fade in off the wall as it comes to its resting point. We do so by hiding everything but the walls and the character, and locking the walls. Let's zoom in where it's nice and easy to see. We have our title and the start button coming to rest at frame 20, and I want our character to be exactly where it is now at frame 20, but I want it to fade in with some movement. Let's select the character and at frame 20, click in the position boxes and just hit enter. This will force Buildbox to record a position key. At frame 20, let's set the opacity to 1 and bring our orange timeline marker to frame 0. We can move our character more against the wall and set the opacity to 0. Let's take off the record button and play the animation editor and have a look. This looks really cool, and this is what will happen when we open this menu. Now let's click on the different stages because I want you to notice something that happens at frame 20. This is where we have our open sequence come to rest. If we can change our frame count to 20 once the open sequence plays, the idle sequence will start. If we click on the close sequence, you can see we didn't put the title and start button back to where we originally had it. So we need to make sure we are on frame 20 and the record button is enabled. Let's copy and paste our positions from the start and title items from the close sequence to the open sequence. And let's preview our menu. This is looking great. The next step is getting into the idle animation sequence by animating the start button and giving it a little shake. Remember that Buildbox animates at 30 frames per second, so 60 frames will give us a 2-second loop. Let's hide everything but the start button and get our timeline marker to frame 0 and enable the record button and select the rotation timeline. We want to make sure to force Buildbox to record a position key by clicking in the rotation option and just hitting enter. Once we have done this, we see the position marker appear in the timeline. Let's do the same at frame 10, but now at frame 12, 14, 16, and 18, let's cook up a little shake by changing the rotation between -2 and 2 degrees until again recording 0 at frame 20. Moving on, let's unhide everything and preview our game. Wow, this is really coming together nicely. The next thing we want to do is go into the mind map by clicking on the mind map button in the upper left and double clicking on the game over menu. I'm also going to show you how to give some movement to our buttons when we open this menu. First thing is to hide everything but the buttons, making sure that the record button is enabled and we are on frame 0. Let's drag them out to the sides. Then at frame 20, we will put them back in the middle. However, this time, let's just get our original positions from our close sequence. From this point, I want that to be the end of the opening sequence before the idle sequence starts. So let's change the frame count to 20 so it ends when they get to the middle. Let's go to the idle event and give our game over some scaling animation. We do this by hiding everything but the game over graphic and get it selected and enable record in our timeline at frame 0. Let's hit enter in the scale options to force Buildbox to record a position key and move our timeline to frame 20. The next step is to hold shift to scale the game over graphic up, and now let's get to frame 40 and type in 1 and 1. Following on, let's take our timeline off of record and let's have a look at our animated menus in our game. We could spend a whole lot more calories getting all sorts of neat things animated in the menus, but I think watching this video a few times will arm you with enough information for you to really cook up something neat in your game menus. Alright, let's talk about a really fun part of making games, the music. No game is complete without sounds and sound effects. We are going to show you how to do this, but also give players the option of muting the game if they desire. The first step is to bring some music into the game. So to do so, we will need to load music into the user interface that we are using. Having just animated our Game Over menu, let's go back into the mind map and put music in the Game Over menu that will get triggered every time it loads. You can see the option for music here. Just drag an MP3 into that square and you're done. It's that simple. When the Game Over menu is loaded, Buildbox will play that music until it encounters another UI with music on it. If we wanted a different song to play when the game goes back to the main menu, we would select our game's main menu and add music there. Keep in mind that each menu our game loads will load that music. So if our player is dying a lot and restarting, different music will play over and over, so that might get really annoying. One way to avoid this is to put music on just the start menu and then no other menu would trigger or replay music. If we already added the music we want to another menu, we can just add it here without dragging it in again. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to add sound effects. The perfect place to start is right in our main menu where we have options to add sounds to a lot of different things, including buttons in our menus. Let's drag an MP3 into the click square of our start button here, and let's hear it work. If we wanted to add the same sound to the other buttons in the other menus, just like the music, we don't have to drag it in again, we can just select it in the square. Let's put the same sound in our pause menu buttons and our buttons we just animated in the Game Over UI as well. Now that we have animated our Game Over menu and added sounds to the buttons, there are some options we need to look at when the player dies that concern how soon the Game Over menu gets loaded. So let's look at some bonus info I have for you. In this video, let's double-click our World node and select our character in the Asset panel. And in the Options panel to the right, let's have a look at some options. From the defeat animation down to the gameplay effects, we can trigger a sound to play when the player dies by dragging in an MP3 into the defeated sound square, so that when we die, we should hear the defeated sound play. You will also notice a few things happen before the Game Over UI loads. We see our player turn into a particle effect, and we also see a camera that shakes and a camera that flashes. Let's take a look at the options in which the defeated animation can be changed. We can just drag any image or PNG sequence into the option by just adjusting the speed at which the frames play. We can loop the animation if we want to, but if we didn't want to loop it and we wanted to give the death animation time to play out, we would have to set our game over effects properly. The delay is measured in seconds. So a 2 in here would give us a 2-second delay from the time the player dies to the time the Game Over menu loads. Camera shake and camera flash is the same as it is in the actions that we covered in part 5, and it is also in seconds. Let's make our camera shake 1.5 and our flash 0.25. The fall attribute is a setting that, if set to a non-zero value, will cause the character to fall with the gravity or direction of the game. The number represents how much the curve will bounce before falling. This is great for platformers, but also works with our game because if we set this to 0, we see our player pretty much stops dead while the Game Over mechanics play out, so let's make that 0.5. Okay, now I want to share some bonus info wrapped around animating our Game Over UI, the main menu UI, and adding our defeated sound. Let's add some other sounds into the game by selecting our swirly enemies here and give them some sounds to play with when they wake up. Also, let's give our bumper a taking damage sound so that every time we trigger that cool taking damage animation that throws us up against the wall, it also plays a nice sound with it. Let's also add a sound to our invincibility power-up and to our coins. And let's hear our game really come together for the first time. Glitch is really shaping up nicely. This is really getting to be fun. We made a ton of progress in this video. In the next tutorial, we are going to cover making multiple game worlds, and we are going to make a turbo mode for our glitch game. I'll see you in part 7.